The gavel echoed through the dead-silent courtroom, sealing what everyone thought was just another open and shut case. Two smirking patrol officers had just perjured themselves to put an innocent man behind bars. But they had no idea the man in shackles wasn't a desperate criminal. He was a federal agent. The rain was coming down in sheets, slicking the asphalt of Westbridge's industrial district into a black mirror. It was late at night, the kind of hour when the only people still awake were those running from the law and those paid to chase them. Special Agent Marcus Hale belonged to the latter, though looking at him, you'd never guess it. In his mid-30s, Marcus was exhausted and running on nothing but cheap diner coffee and adrenaline. For nearly a year, he had been deep undercover, infiltrating a mid-level narcotics syndicate operating out of Pennsylvania. To the streets, he was Darnell, a quiet, efficient logistics guy who moved product in a beat-up 2014 Chevy Malibu. To the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he was the linchpin in Operation Iron Grip, a multi-agency task force about to bring down a syndicate that spanned multiple states. He was just blocks away from his safe house when the flashing red and blue lights illuminated his rearview mirror. Marcus sighed, easing his foot off the gas and pulling the Malibu over to the cracked curb. He checked his speedometer. He was doing exactly the speed limit. His blinker was on. His registration under his alias was up to date. There was absolutely no reason for a traffic stop. But as he glanced in the side mirror and saw the silhouette of a Westbridge police cruiser, a familiar sinking realization settled in his gut. Two officers stepped out into the freezing rain, Officer Harlan Mercer and Officer Jasper Reed. They were notorious in their precinct, a pair of patrolmen who treated the city's poorer neighborhoods like their own personal hunting grounds. Marcus had read their files during a broader corruption sweep assessment years earlier. They were known for excessive force, dubious arrests, and miraculous drug busts that always seemed to happen when their body cameras conveniently malfunctioned. "Keep your hands on the wheel, Darnell," Marcus muttered to himself, slipping into his undercover persona. Officer Mercer approached the driver's side, shining a high-powered tactical flashlight directly into Marcus's eyes, blinding him. Officer Reed hung back near the passenger side rear quarter panel, his hand resting casually on the butt of his holstered service weapon. "Window down, all the way," Mercer barked, his voice dripping with unwarranted hostility. Marcus complied, the electric motor whining as the glass lowered, letting in the freezing rain. "Evening, officer. Was I speeding?" "License, registration, and proof of insurance. Don't make any sudden movements, boy," Mercer commanded, completely ignoring the question. Marcus felt a muscle jump in his jaw at the disrespect, but he kept his face impassive. He moved his hands slowly, deliberately. "It's in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for it now." "I didn't ask for a narration, just get it," Mercer snapped. Marcus retrieved the forged documents and handed them over. Mercer barely glanced at them before shining the light throughout the interior of the Malibu. There was nothing to see. Fast food wrappers, an empty coffee cup, and the smell of stale air. "Step out of the vehicle," Mercer ordered. "Officer, why did you pull me over?" Marcus asked, his tone level, devoid of the panic Mercer was clearly hoping to provoke. "Broken taillight. Now step out of the vehicle before I drag you out." Marcus knew his taillights were perfect. He had checked the car himself earlier that evening, but arguing on the side of a dark road with two adrenaline junkie cops was a losing game. He unbuckled his seatbelt, pushed the door open, and stepped out into the biting cold. Before his feet were fully planted, Reed moved in from the passenger side, grabbing Marcus by the shoulder and slamming him chest first against the wet hood of the Malibu. The metal was freezing. "Hey, I'm not resisting," Marcus said sharply, keeping his hands flat on the hood where they could be seen. "Shut your mouth," Reed yelled aggressively, patting down Marcus's sides and kicking his legs apart. "Mercer, check the car." Marcus turned his head slightly, watching as Mercer leaned into the Malibu. He didn't just look. He began tearing the interior apart. He ripped the contents of the glove box onto the floorboards, pulled the floor mats up, and violently shoved his hands under the driver's seat. Marcus's mind raced. In a hidden, magnetized lockbox welded behind the dashboard was his FBI badge, his encrypted federal comms device, and his real identification. If Mercer found that box, Operation Iron Grip was dead. The syndicate had eyes everywhere, and a rumor of a Fed getting pinched in Westbridge would reach the cartel boss by morning. Marcus would be burned, months of work destroyed, and his informants would be slaughtered. But Mercer didn't find the lockbox. Instead, Mercer emerged from the car holding up a clear plastic baggie containing 2 ounces of white crystalline powder. "Methamphetamine." Well, Mercer sneered, holding the baggie up to the streetlight. "Look what we have here, Reed. Looks like our boy here is trafficking." Marcus stared at the bag. It wasn't his, it was a classic drop. Mercer had palmed it from his own tactical vest when he leaned into the car. "That's not mine," Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. "You planted that." Reed grabbed Marcus's wrist, violently twisting it behind his back and slapping on a pair of steel handcuffs. They were painfully tight, biting into the bone. "Save it for the judge, scumbag. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it." As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, Marcus made a calculated choice. He could shout that he was a federal agent. He could demand they call his special agent in charge, Everett Kane. It would stop the arrest. immediately, but it would also generate a local police report, a paper trail that the cartel's moles inside the precinct would inevitably see. His cover would be blown. Or he could take the ride. He could let these dirty cops process Darnell, post bail, and then completely dismantle them in court where it mattered, all without compromising his task force's timeline. Marcus leaned back against the hard plastic seat of the cruiser as it sped toward the precinct. You boys picked the wrong car tonight, he thought, watching the city lights blur through the rain-streaked window. I'm going to let you dig your own graves. Months later, the heavy oak doors of courtroom 402 in the Westbridge Municipal Courthouse swung open, letting in a draft of stale hallway air. Marcus sat at the defense table wearing a crisp, understated charcoal suit. He looked entirely different from the street-level courier he had played the night of his arrest. Beside him sat Samuel Crow, a notoriously overworked public defender whose tie was crooked and whose briefcase looked like it had survived a war zone. Crow was sweating profusely, nervously flipping through a manila folder that contained Marcus's fabricated arrest record. Look, Darnell, I'm telling you, Crow whispered, frantically leaning in close. 8A Langford doesn't lose. He's offering a plea, 2 years probation, a felony mark on your record, and you walk out of here today. If we take this to trial, you're looking at a mandatory minimum of several years in state prison. The cops found the drugs in your car. It's their word against yours, and juries in this county love cops. Marcus didn't look at Crow. His eyes were fixed on Assistant District Attorney Victor Langford, a slick, arrogant prosecutor who was currently laughing at a joke made by Officer Mercer near the prosecution table. Mercer was in full dress uniform, his brass polished, looking every bit the pristine guardian of the community. Officer Reed sat in the gallery smirking. I'm not taking a plea, Sam, Marcus said quietly. I'm entirely innocent. Innocence doesn't matter in room 402, Crow hissed. Evidence matters. They have the drugs, Darnell. They planted them. So you think Judge Voss cares? You think she hasn't heard that 1,000 times this year? Before Marcus could respond, the bailiff shouted, All rise! Judge Elena Voss took the bench. She was a stern, uncompromising woman with a reputation for mercilessly clearing her docket. She peered over her reading glasses, looking down at the courtroom with a mix of authority and utter exhaustion. Be seated, Judge Voss ordered, shuffling some papers. State of Pennsylvania versus Darnell Hughes. Possession with intent to distribute. Mr. Langford, is the state ready? Ready, Your Honor, Langford said, standing up and buttoning his expensive navy suit. Mr. Crow, how does your client plead? Marcus stood up before Crow could open his mouth. Not guilty, Your Honor, and if it pleases the court, I would like to dismiss my appointed counsel and proceed pro se. The courtroom went dead silent. Crow looked like he was about to have a heart attack. A.D.A. Langford let out a loud, mocking scoff. Judge Voss narrowed her eyes. Mr. Hughes, you are facing serious felony charges. Proceeding without legal representation is highly ill-advised. You are not a lawyer. I understand the risks, Your Honor, Marcus said smoothly, his posture perfect, his voice projecting clearly across the room. I waive my right to counsel. I will be representing myself. Voss stared at him for a long moment. There was something in Marcus's demeanor, a lack of fear, a composed precision that didn't align with the file sitting in front of her. Very well, it's your funeral. Mr. Langford, call your first witness. The state calls Officer Harlan Mercer, Langford announced triumphantly. Mercer swaggered up to the witness stand, placing his hand on the Bible and swearing to tell the whole truth. He settled into the chair, adjusting his microphone with practiced ease. He had done this 100 times. Langford approached the podium. Officer Mercer, can you recount the events of that night? Certainly, Mercer said, looking respectfully at the jury box, playing his part to perfection. My partner and I observed the defendant driving erratically. He was swerving over the yellow line. We initiated a traffic stop for a broken taillight and suspected DUI. When I approached the vehicle, the defendant was hostile, aggressive, and refused to comply with basic commands. Did you conduct a search of the vehicle? Langford asked. Yes, for officer safety. We asked him to step out. When he did, I illuminated the interior of his car and saw, in plain view, protruding from under the driver's seat, a large plastic bag containing a crystalline substance later confirmed to be methamphetamine. In plain view, Langford emphasized for the record. Yes, sir. Plain view. The defendant then became physically combative and we had to subdue him to effect the arrest. Thank you, officer. No further questions, Langford said, strutting back to his table. He shot Marcus a pitying look. Judge Voss looked down at Marcus. Mr. Hughes, you may cross-examine the witness. Marcus stood up slowly. He didn't carry any notes. He didn't stumble. He walked to the center of the floor and looked directly into Harlan Mercer's eyes. For a fraction of a second, Mercer's confident smirk faltered. Officer Mercer, Marcus began, his voice calm, ringing with authority. You testified that my driving was erratic, correct? That is correct, Mercer said. And you pulled me over for a broken taillight? Yes. Officer Mercer, isn't it true that a 2014 Chevy Malibu's taillight assembly is a single integrated LED unit? If the taillight were broken, the brake light and turn signal would also fail to illuminate. Mercer frowned. I don't know the exact mechanics of your car, Darnell. I just know it was out. I see. You also testified that I was hostile and combative, which prompted you to search the vehicle. Marcus paced a few steps to the right. Westbridge Police Department policy mandates that all patrol vehicles have their dashboard cameras activated during a traffic stop. Do you have the footage of my erratic driving and combative behavior? Mercer cleared his throat. Unfortunately, the dash cam in our cruiser experienced a technical malfunction that evening. A malfunction, Marcus repeated, letting the word hang in the air. How unfortunate. What about your body-worn camera? Department policy dictates it must be active during all civilian engagements. Mercer shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My battery died earlier in my shift. My camera was also malfunctioning due to the heavy rain. So both cameras, the dash cam and the evidence that could corroborate your story, completely failed on this specific night at this specific time? Objection, Langford shouted, standing up. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Voss said, though she was now looking at Officer Mercer with intense critical scrutiny. Move on, Mr. Hughes. Gladly, Your Honor, Marcus said. He took a step closer to the witness stand. Officer Mercer, you swore under oath today that you found the narcotics in plain view, protruding from under the seat. That's right, I saw it plain as day. You are absolutely certain, under penalty of perjury, you swear that you didn't plant those drugs? You swear that you didn't violate my civil rights? Mercer leaned forward, his face flushing with anger. Listen to me, Darnell. I know what I saw. You're a drug dealer. We found your stash. I didn't plant anything, and I don't appreciate a criminal trying to drag my name through the mud in this courtroom. I just want to be absolutely clear, officer, Marcus pressed, his voice dropping an octave, losing any trace of the street persona he had been wearing for months. The tone was pure, authoritative federal law enforcement. You are locking in your testimony right here, right now. I am, Mercer spat. Marcus turned his back on Mercer and looked at the judge. The trap was fully sprung. Every lie was on the official court record. Your Honor, Marcus said softly, reaching into the inner pocket of his tailored suit jacket. The defense would like to enter a new piece of evidence into the record, and I believe the prosecution is going to want to amend their charges. Langford laughed out loud. Objection. What is this nonsense? He's a pro se defendant trying to introduce surprise evidence. Marcus pulled a sleek black leather wallet from his pocket. He didn't open it immediately. He looked at Officer Mercer, who was now staring at the wallet with a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread creeping up his spine. It's not surprise evidence, Mr. Langford, Marcus said. He flipped the leather wallet open and held it up high for the entire courtroom to see. The fluorescent lights caught the gleam of the solid gold shield and the crisp federal ID card opposite it. My name is not Darnell Hughes, Marcus announced, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. I am Special Agent Marcus Hale with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Officer Mercer just committed federal perjury in your courtroom. The silence in courtroom 402 was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a catastrophic explosion. For several agonizing seconds, nobody moved. Judge Elena Voss froze, her pen hovering millimeters above her legal pad. A.D. Victor Langford's mocking smile slowly dissolved, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of sheer incomprehension. In the gallery, Officer Jasper Reed sat up rigid, the color draining entirely from his face as his eyes locked onto the solid gold FBI shield, catching the fluorescent lights. But it was Officer Harlan Mercer on the witness stand who looked like he had just been handed a death sentence. His arrogant swagger evaporated. A thick bead of sweat materialized at his temple, tracing a jagged line down his pale cheek. What is this? Langford finally stammered, his voice cracking entirely devoid of its previous theatrical confidence. Your Honor, this is a forgery. It has to be a stunt. He's a street-level drug runner. Approach the bench, Judge Voss commanded, her voice slicing through the tension like a scalpel. Now, both of you. Marcus snapped the leather wallet shut and walked calmly toward the judge's bench. Langford scrambled after him, nearly tripping over the edge of the prosecution table in his panic. Marcus handed his federal credentials up to the judge. Voss pulled her reading glasses down the bridge of her nose, scrutinizing the holographic watermark, the embedded microchip, and the unmistakable seal of the Department of Justice. Special Agent Marcus Hale, Voss read aloud, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. She looked down at Marcus. You have been operating under the alias Darnell Hughes. Yes, Your Honor, Marcus replied, his tone respectful but firm. For nearly a year, I have been the lead undercover operative in a joint federal task force, Operation Iron Grip, targeting the distribution networks of a multi-state narcotics syndicate. My arrest by Officers Mercer and Reed was an unanticipated complication, but one we decided to utilize to our advantage. Utilize? Langford hissed, his face turning a blotchy red. You wasted the court's time. You intentionally allowed a fraudulent prosecution to proceed to trial. I allowed corrupt police officers to perjure themselves under oath, Marcus corrected sharply, turning his gaze to Langford. Officers who, according to our ongoing intelligence, are on the payroll of the very cartel my task force is attempting to dismantle. A collective gasp echoed from the gallery. Crow, the public defender, had slumped back into his chair, staring at the ceiling as if he had just witnessed a miracle. Judge Voss slammed her gavel down, silencing the rising murmurs. She glared at the witness stand. Officer Mercer, you are still under oath. I suggest you think very, very carefully about your next words. Mercer was hyperventilating, his hands gripping the wooden railing of the witness box so tightly his knuckles were bone white. I want union representation, he choked out, his eyes darting frantically toward the courtroom exit. I plead the Fifth. It's a little late for the Fifth Amendment, Thomas, Marcus said, stepping back to the center of the room, especially when you've already locked in your testimony, but you shouldn't worry about the lack of body camera footage from that night. I brought my own. Marcus reached into his briefcase and produced a sleek black encrypted flash drive. Your Honor, the 2014 Chevy Malibu I was driving is a Federal Fleet vehicle, Marcus explained to the court. It is equipped with military-grade covert audio and visual recording devices. 2 4K pinhole cameras are mounted in the rearview mirror and the dashboard air vents. High-fidelity microphones are embedded in the headliner. Marcus handed the drive to the court bailiff. On this drive is the raw, unedited footage of the traffic stop that night. It clearly shows Officer Mercer reaching into his tactical vest, producing a baggie of methamphetamine, and tossing it onto the floorboard of my vehicle before falsely declaring it was in plain view. Mercer lunged out of the witness chair, panic entirely overriding his logic. This is a setup, that's illegal surveillance. Sit down! Voss roared, her fury absolute. Bailiff, secure the witness. 2 armed court officers immediately stepped forward, placing their hands heavily on Mercer's shoulders and forcing him back into the wooden chair. In the gallery, Officer Reed stood up and tried to quietly shuffle toward the heavy oak doors, desperate to escape. I wouldn't do that, Jasper, Marcus called out, not even turning around to look at him, unless you want to add resisting a federal arrest to your list of charges. Right on cue, the heavy oak doors of courtroom 402 burst open. The courtroom was instantly swarmed. 6 men and women in dark windbreakers emblazoned with the bright yellow letters FBI flooded the aisles, moving with tactical practice precision. Leading the charge was Special Agent in Charge Everett Kane, a grizzled no-nonsense veteran of the Bureau who looked like he had spent his entire career chewing on nails. Federal agents, nobody moves, Kane's voice boomed, drowning out the panicked murmurs of the jury. 2 agents bypassed the prosecution table and immediately flanked Officer Reed in the gallery, kicking his legs apart and slapping federal steel around his wrists. Reed didn't fight back, he just dropped his head in defeat. Kane walked straight past the trembling ADA Langford and approached the bench, flashing his credentials to Judge Voss. Special Agent in Charge, Everett Kane, FBI. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption of your proceedings, but we have federal arrest warrants for several individuals in this room. I am more than happy to accommodate you, Agent Kane, Judge Voss said, her eyes blazing with righteous anger as she stared daggers at Mercer. It seems my courtroom has been used as a stage for a criminal conspiracy. It goes much deeper than perjury, Your Honor, Marcus said, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with his commanding officer. The methamphetamine that Officer Mercer planted in my vehicle, we ran a chemical analysis and cross-referenced its batch signature. It wasn't just random street product, it was part of a large seizure made by the Westbridge Police Department years earlier. Langford's eyes widened in horror. That's impossible. That evidence is locked in the precinct's secure vault. Not anymore, Kane said grimly. We audited the precinct's evidence logs this morning while this trial was commencing. The drugs Mercer planted were smuggled out of the precinct's evidence locker, and there's only one man with the administrative clearance to override those security protocols without triggering an alert. Marcus turned to look at the defeated, handcuffed patrolman. Captain Elias Crow, your commanding officer. Mercer squeezed his eyes shut, a pathetic whimper escaping his throat. The entire criminal pipeline was laid bare. Captain Crow had been stealing confiscated cartel drugs, and his dirty patrolmen, Mercer and Reed, were putting them back on the street, occasionally using them to frame innocent civilians to meet their arrest quotas and keep the heat off the real cartel operatives. We arrested Captain Crow 20 minutes ago in his driveway, Kane announced to the stunned courtroom. Officers Harlan Mercer and Jasper Reed, you are under arrest for conspiracy to distribute narcotics, deprivation of rights under color of law, federal perjury, and obstruction of justice. The FBI agents dragged Mercer out of the witness box. He didn't strut this time. His polished brass uniform suddenly looked like a clown costume. As the agents marched the disgraced cops down the center aisle, the silence of the courtroom was replaced by the heavy, satisfying clatter of chains. Marcus turned to ADA Langford, who was clutching his briefcase like a life preserver. I suggest you review your caseload, Mr. Langford. Every single arrest Mercer and Reed have made over recent years is about to be federally audited. If we find out you willfully ignored their corruption to boost your conviction rate, we'll be seeing you again very soon. Langford swallowed hard, utterly speechless, his career flashing before his eyes. Case dismissed with extreme prejudice, Judge Voss declared, slamming her gavel down with such force it echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Hughes, or rather Agent Hale, the court thanks you for your service. Marcus nodded respectfully to the judge. He walked over to the defense table, picked up his charcoal suit jacket, and slipped it on. I told you I wasn't taking the plea, Sam, Marcus said with a faint knowing smile to the stunned public defender. Special Agent Marcus Hale walked out of the courtroom, the heavy oak doors swinging shut behind him. The air in the hallway was no longer stale. It felt clear, sharp, and clean. The syndicate was crumbling, the corrupt brass was in chains, and the streets of Westbridge were finally about to see some real justice. If this story of absolute justice and a flawless undercover sting kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Corruption thrives in the dark, but it only takes one person to shine a light and bring the whole system crashing down. Share this video with your friends to spread the word that no one is above the law, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more jaw-dropping, true-to-life justice stories.